I'm Terry Garvey.
And I'm Derek Mooney.
And this is
Read Right Now.
We're here at Pavey Point, the Traveller Centre in Dublin, to look at barriers and obstacles to learning.
We'll be looking at the different forms barriers take, physical barriers, those outside us and those inside us.
They can all hold you back unless you can find ways to get around them.
But we all have the strengths and resources to help us deal with any obstacle.
We'll also be looking at particular learning points like reading a learning timetable and spelling words with the PH sound.
And reading food labels.
But it's time for us to go our separate ways and see what barriers we come up against.
To get the most out of Read Right Now, you should get yourself a copy of the free Read Right Now workbook. All you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 1-800 20 20 65. It's got worksheets and activities to practice, as well as lots more tips and advice.
Learning is like any journey. You're bound to be presented with obstacles along the way. And these obstacles have to be confronted before you can move on. These barriers usually fall into three categories: physical barriers, barriers outside us, and barriers inside us. Physical barriers include impairments like poor mobility, poor hearing, or poor sight. Barriers outside can include things like lack of childcare, money problems, or lack of access to information. If a learning centre doesn't send out posters or send out leaflets, then you might know that they have courses available that could suit you. Thank you. And the final category, barriers inside us, includes lack of confidence, poor self-esteem, and fear.
Here at Pavey Point, a lot of work is going on to combat prejudice which travellers experience and which is an obstacle to many things, including learning. One person can meet barriers from all categories. For example, you may experience social prejudice and have, say, poor vision and also poor self-confidence. The combination of things can be a bit overwhelming, but you need to separate them out and deal with them individually to move on. Some obstacles you meet may be outside your control. For example, you might not be able to find somebody to look after your children, or you may not be in a position to pay for the transport fares to and from classes. Well, in some cases, there is financial support and help available to those of you who want to go back to learning. A course coordinator at your local adult education centre should be able to advise you.
Valerie Stanley lives in Dublin and leads an active life with her husband and 3 children. However, she faced some real barriers to her education throughout her school years.
I went to the deaf school in Cork. And this education system was only based on the oral system. They didn't use sign language at all. Not at all. In the classroom, I missed an awful lot. I just could not follow the oral system. And at the same time, we had to attend speech classes an awful lot. So therefore, our educational input was very limited. I mean, if we had been hearing, then we would have spent more time in the education. But because we had to go to speech classes to learn how to speak, then we spent most of our time there and our educational input was much more limited. As a 19-year-old, I left school and my English literacy level was the same as an 8-year-old. That was the way I was able to read. So going out to work or just in the shops, I really had very little confidence in communicating with hearing people through notes. And going out into the workforce, I still was very uneasy about my written ability. I wrote in like baby English, the same as an 8-year-old's English. And then I met my husband, Kevin. And I just couldn't get over his English was so much better than mine, and I was really envious. We had such a different standard, I didn't understand why. And I really wanted to have the same level of English as him, but my problem was a confidence problem. I really didn't have the confidence to go into a hearing literacy classes. I didn't want that. I didn't want to learn with hearing people. I really wished for something different, something like a deaf literacy class. That was really my dream.
Another obstacle that people encounter is lack of time, particularly during the day. So you might want to see if there are classes available at night time that would suit you. Or you can ask family and friends for help, perhaps with childcare. One thing that definitely does help is to fill out a learning timetable, where you chart out your daily activities and the time available to you for learning. You might find that you've more time available than you think. Here's some tips on filling out a learning timetable.
A timetable is a plan showing when something takes place. Everyone is familiar with bus and train timetables. You'll see them attached to bus stops. Timetables have a number of columns designed to show at a glance the time something will occur. Organised people use timetables to ensure that they give enough time to planning their everyday activities. They design timetables by listing the days of the week and splitting the days up into morning, afternoon and evening. 2 short periods of around 20 minutes morning, afternoon or evening every day are more valuable than 3 hours once a week. When we are very busy, it's easy to say, I just don't have time. But there are always periods in every day that could be used differently. People who train for athletic events, such as a marathon, often have to fit in the time to go for regular runs around their daily lives. Sometimes they go for a run early in the morning, sometimes during the day, and then other times in the evening, depending on their schedule.
Learning can be hard, especially if you're looking after a house, holding down a job, or bringing up a family. There are so many things that can gang up and create barriers to us learning. Let's take a look at 3 of the main obstacles to learning: time, space, and people. Time is the biggie. There's always something else to be done instead of sitting down to learn. Whether it's washing the dishes or going to the pictures, you'll always find something to put off learning. Here's a suggestion. Plan when you're going to learn. And remember, it's better to plan 2 15-minute sessions rather than a single half-hour one. Your brain learns much better when you break up learning into small chunks. Space is the second barrier to learning. Everyone else might be sitting around watching television or listening to music, and you're trying to read or study. Well, here's a second tip. Find yourself a corner, a special place where you know you can learn, read, or study. Make that your learning zone. Might be a stool in the kitchen or a cushion on the bedroom floor. The important thing is that it's a quiet place away from other people. You shouldn't have to think, where will I sit each time you study? It's little things like that that can become the real obstacles to learning. The third barrier is people. If your friends and family put you off studying, sit them down and explain why you're doing it and how it's important to you. Don't let them derail you. Get them on side. It's important to have their support. Of course, the biggest barrier is inside your own head. You're bound to go through times when you think, why bother? I can't do this. If this happens, look back at your workbook and remind yourself of the progress you made and the reasons you started in the first place. If you get through these down times, then you'll find it easier and easier to stay on the road to learning.
Nearly everyone experiences barriers from within themselves. Lack of self-confidence or lack of self-esteem. If you think you can't do something, you can actually stop yourself from doing it. Fear is the biggest barrier when it comes to learning. Fear of failure or fear of looking stupid. Now, this fear can be overwhelming. You can feel the climb is all uphill. And most adults who had a negative experience when they were in school find they have very little self-confidence when it comes to education later in life.
Valerie's big breakthrough happened when she came across Link Up, an adult literacy project aimed at the deaf community.
So I'm married now and I have 3 children, and we all sign together. It's really wonderful to be able to communicate with the children. It's really good, and I really believe in signing with the children. I think it's very important to be able to communicate with them. And so I heard eventually that Link Up were setting up deaf literacy classes. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's what I really want. But it also just struck me that my oldest daughter was just 8 and that we had the same literacy level. And I thought, no, absolutely no way. I didn't want her to grow up and obviously improve while I stayed at the same position. I really just did not want that. I really wanted to better myself. So through practice and working on my nouns and my verbs and my adjectives and working with my tutor, really things started to improve and my confidence grew enormously. And then one day I was out window shopping with a friend of mine in a shopping centre. We were just walking around and I saw something and I had a question. I wanted to ask one of the shop assistants something. So I went up to her, bold as brass, asked her for a piece of paper and a pen, started to write her a note. It was no problem at all, and then it suddenly struck me. Oh my God, I had come so far that before I had always asked other people to do things for me, but this time I was able to do it for myself. It felt good.